All right, are you ready for some Republican House drama? And this is going to start to be very big news as soon as the debate is over. You'll remember every year we have to pass 12 appropriations bills. Those are spending bills for the different departments. And because Republicans have a majority in the House, very slim one, just a handful of votes, so Republicans are in charge of this process. Johnson is in charge of the Republicans, he's their speaker, and Trump is in charge of Johnson because he is leading all of the Republicans around by their short hairs. So now the Republicans have gotten us to a point where the budget is due. It's got to be in by September 30th, so we're scrambling. It's always a scramble when Republicans are in charge because they squander time doing stupid things. And Trump has an agenda, so things are even more complicated. Trump has told Speaker Johnson that he has to attach something Trump wants to the spending bills that have to pass. And the something that Trump wants him to attach is a bill that will fuel up a lot of distrust around the election, will fuel up a bunch of xenophobia and fear of immigrants, and will divide our country even further. And that bill is called the SAVE Act. By the way, we're not even going to get appropriations bills. What we're going to get is a continuing resolution. You'll remember that phrase because this is what Republicans do every time. They can't get anything done, they kick the can down the road, and in this case, Mike Johnson wants to kick the can all the way down to the next presidential administration, March of next year. The problem with that being that spending levels get frozen, and guess who's going to suffer? The military, veterans, and people on Social Security and Medicare, as well as the Internal Revenue Service and a bunch of other stuff. It will hit everybody. So that's one way Republicans are hurting us. But then we've got this bill, the SAVE Act, which Mike Johnson is going to try to attach to this continuing resolution and take this entire stinking pile of trash and try to pass it all at once. The SAVE Act stands for something that sounds really nice. It is the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. Oh, it sounds so good, doesn't it? And what it's about is basically a bill that will require everybody who registers to vote in our country to provide proof of citizenship. You think, well, that sounds harmless enough, right? I mean, don't we all need to be citizens to vote? And yeah, we do. We have always, for the whole time that this country has existed and voters have existed in it. You couldn't vote if you weren't a U.S. citizen and a bunch of other things for a very long time. But at no point in our country's history has proof of citizenship been required in order to register to vote. And that is because the problem of non-citizen voting does not exist. And Republicans are going to lie on this front. You'll hear Mike Johnson say things like, well, we know it exists, it's really hard to prove, but we know it's happening. And Trump just, in his usual deranged, unstable way, just says whatever, kind of communicating the fact that our voting polls are being overrun by non-citizen voters. Not a thing. And here's why it's not a thing. Because it's a federal crime. Because if you do it, you go to jail for 5 years. And because if you're undocumented and you do it, you get deported. And guess what most undocumented people don't want to do? They don't want to be deported. So the Brennan Center did a huge study of this, vast, totally sweeping study. And they found, this is in 2016, they looked at about 24 million votes cast. They caught 30 examples of non-citizen voting. And all of those people were caught, by the way, because states have multiple systems in place to catch them. That's why people don't do it. But Republicans don't want you to think that. They want you to believe our voting system is broken, even though it is one of the most safe and effective ones in the entire world. And voter fraud is vanishingly rare, and non-citizen voting is beyond vanishingly rare. So I know what you're going to say. Well, then, Jessica, why does it matter? Just let them pass the SAVE Act, and since everybody has to be a citizen anyway, they'll just provide their passport or birth certificate or whatever. Well, it turns out that 9% of U.S. citizens don't have access to that paperwork. They've either lost it or it's in a security box somewhere and they can't access it. There's a lot of people who live in poverty, who move a lot. They don't have those documents and they can't afford to get them again because it's expensive. And in fact, you might be shocked to know that 9% of Americans works out to over 21 million people who don't have access to proof of their citizenship but are in fact citizens. So this is not a problem. And yet the SAVE Act would create an enormous problem. It would immediately disenfranchise 21 million American citizens. Are you sure you're not one of them? Anyway, Johnson is going to try to squeeze this SAVE Act into this continuing resolution, which in and of itself is a disaster. And Republicans are once again proving that A, they want to suppress the vote, because the other purpose of the SAVE Act is to intimidate Black and brown people and make them afraid to vote. B, It proves that they can't govern, which is something that we've gotten ample proof of, but there's more. And C, it proves that they are genuinely xenophobic people who are trying to gin up fear of immigrants and also insecurity about our election system, which is undermining our democracy. And I'm telling you all of this right now because this is not acceptable. Biden will veto the SAVE Act, and that is a good thing. But should Republicans win in November, you can look forward to every kind of voter suppression and xenophobic and hate-filled bill you can imagine. These are not serious people, but the consequences of them being in power are serious. Keep it in mind in November. Thanks for listening.